Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. Oh, my favorite time is when I get to tune in with my listeners and share and bring these powerful transformational stories to your lives, because I always know that it'll touch whoever it needs to touch in the moment. And this story is no exception. I am very excited today to bring you my guest, Sheryl, who is a business coach, a personal coach. She is an author. She is just amazing. And I'm going to quickly read her bio before we jump into her story. Sheryl serves as a chief experience officer for her own consulting and coaching business, and she works with organizations on creating customer-centric culture, leadership development, and improving their overall employee engagement. She has served for more than 20 years in leadership, coaching, training, and mentoring individuals to operate within their full potential. She is a 5-time author, award-winning international speaker, contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine and the New Zealand blog, Customer Thinks, and podcast host of the Customer's Tea. She has a BS in Business Administration from the Everest University, Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, Jack Canfield Success Principal Trainer, and Neuro-Linguistic Programming Practitioner. And when she's not writing, she's working on one of her many other exciting projects. Sheryl Mays, welcome to Leap. It is so nice to have you here.
Hello, Susan. I'm excited to be here.
Well, what I'll tell my listeners is that you and I actually I don't often get the luxury of talking to my guests, but you and I were able to talk for a whole hour before this show, which I'm really excited about, because I think that there's such a beautiful complexity to your story. And also, I think in being able to talk through it really whittled it down to a pretty pinnacle transformational moment for you that we'll get to. We'll have to keep people waiting. So let's start from the beginning with you. I think that what I would love for you to sort of open up with is just like this trajectory of your life, because you were a vice president, you were very successful in your career. And then, as you so simply put it, is you married the wrong person that led you on quite a dark soul of the night, I guess you could say. So I'm going to hand the mic over to you, and I would like you to start your story wherever feels the most poignant for you.
Sure. It's interesting because when people hear, after you've read the bio, right, and you're all of these things, and you've elevated in your career, you've mastered some of those dreams and desires that you've actually sought, but then there's the other side, right? There's that personal side. And sometimes it's a mismatch, and people go, how could that have happened to an individual that is such a high achiever? And so if we start there, it's just that, right? On the one side, I've done everything that I possibly wanted to do in my career. I've had the opportunity to indulge in some amazing, I guess you can call them fantasy type experiences that I've had for myself, bucket list experiences, and I've been able to start my own business. But some of that came after the fact. And then you mentioned the fact that I married the wrong person. And that's where the trajectory changed. And sometimes, even though you have the best intentions, you have this idea of this person that you're involved in, and you think this is the right person. This person was selected for me, because there's so much that you have in common. There's so many commonalities. We grew up in the same city, never met each other. We attended some of the same places when we were younger, never crossed paths. Our friends are cross friends, but again, never interacted. And then adulthood comes, we meet. And so you reminisce on all of these things, and you go, this must be my soulmate. And so we got
Right.
married.
I want to just stop you right there, because I think that we're always doing that too, right? Those of us who are spiritual seekers and followers, we're always looking for the signs, right? To sort of give us our guideposts on whether or not we're making the right decisions. I just wanted to throw that in because I sort of live by that. Is it a sign? And sometimes it is a sign, and other times we miss the signs to run. So keep
Yeah,
going.
exactly. Exactly. And sometimes those signs to run because you're blinded by the possibilities and by the fact that this was chosen, he was delivered, and you miss some of those signs, that those warning signs, those red flags that make you pause and go, wait a second, that didn't sound right. That didn't feel right. There's something awkward here. And that didn't happen until 4 years into the marriage. 4 years into the marriage, I realized that everything that had gone wrong throughout that time frame was because of his narcissism. And I never even knew what that even meant. I've never met anybody that talked about narcissistic personalities, or anyone that was in a relationship with an individual that had narcissistic personalities. And it was just by chance that I happened to come across a video on one of these crazy mornings when I was getting one of these erratic text messages, which I had gotten every single morning throughout the day, just to throw me off, just to let me know that, I'm here to just disrupt your entire psychic, your being, everything that you're doing. I'm here to disrupt that. I got those messages periodically every day. And so this particular day, as I'm sitting in the garage on my way to work, I had a few moments before it was time for me to go in. And so I'm listening to a motivational podcast to build myself back up from reading these emails. And the next podcast that came up, it said, do you know if you're living with a narcissist? And I was curious. And I said, I got time. What does that even mean? And as I'm listening to the podcast, it's all now starting to formulate. And it's coming to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the reason why he acts like this. This is the reason why he's so, and I don't even want to say mean. It was just evil. This is the reason why he didn't like my family. This is the reason why he didn't like to go out with my friends. This was the isolation aspect of it. This was, all of those bullet points of narcissism was spot on.
I have a couple of questions. I want to slow you down here. So, because I'm sure that if I know when I have the questions, my listeners do too. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you a question. You met this guy. How long did you date before you actually ended up marrying him?
We dated for about a year.
Okay. So this whole time, so when you started listening to this podcast, in hindsight, did you start, was this behavior happening early on, or really did it start happening later in the marriage? I'm just trying to gauge, when we talk about missing things, did anything happen? Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say it didn't start early on, because what I realized, and if anybody, one of your listeners or any of your listeners understands narcissism, and I know this topic isn't on narcissism, but if you understand it, they have a tendency of portraying themselves in a different light, much like any chameleon, right? You can be a chameleon, but at some point you go back to your original form. You cannot maintain, right? You cannot maintain that cloaking. You must go back to who you are. And it was at that time when the shift started to happening in our marriage. And I want to say it might have been around maybe year one, right? After year one, things started happening, and he was losing his job periodically. And that's also symptoms of narcissism. It is an inability to stay employed because of certain traits.
Yeah, and for listeners, let me just say what Sheryl is talking about is narcissistic personality disorder. So for those of you, instead of spending a lot of time here, and I love that you're giving some of the warning signs, but for people who want to delve more deeply into, there's tons of information on the web, but I still want you to talk about how the narcissism was showing up for you in your particular relationship. So keep going, please.
Yeah. So, as I started seeing these signs, again, right, in hindsight, it was that every time my friends had events, he would never want to go. So therefore I would go. And then it got to the point where I kept making excuses, right? Why doesn't he want to come? Well, something's going on at the house, or, He wasn't feeling good. And I just kept making excuses until I got to the point where I just stopped going. I stopped going because I was tired of making the excuses.
And was anyone in your life saying anything? Were people worried about you? What was happening with the people in your world that you were the closest to, your family, your friends? Did they like him? Did they not like him? Did they keep their mouths shut? What was going on?
Here's the interesting thing about family is that, families see things, but won't say things because they love who you love, right? They're going to support you in any way that they can. But here's what was so interesting, Susan, is that as it started to unfold and unravel, my friends started saying things like, I never really cared about him. I never really liked him. And my family was, I was just wondering, what was the thing that you saw in him? So all of this stuff started happening after the fact that I'm like, why didn't anybody say anything? Right? Why didn't anybody just ask me questions or step up, and just say, why is he like that? And so, no, the answer to your question is that nobody really said anything, and I think it was because in love for me, they wanted me to be happy.
And could you have heard it? Could you have really have heard it at the time?
That's the other thing, right? Would I have listened?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Would I have listened? Because I think if you're in that relationship, and like I said, it wasn't like we were together 2 weeks, decided to get married. Right? We were in this relationship for a year. We really got to know one another. But again, right, you can't keep the cloak on for a very long period of time. It's kind of like that leopard can't remove its spots. They can cover them up, but the spots are always going to be there. And it started coming out, and I started seeing, different things. And so when it really got to the point where it was too much and I was getting sick, I wasn't Sheryl. And you get to a point in your life where you realize I'm not the person that I was. Not because I've grown out of being the person that I was, but because I gave them power. And that's what it boils down to. I believe you either allow things or you create things in your life. And we have to look at it and accept responsibility for some aspect of it. And I say that I allowed him to have that power because in every discussion that we had that turned into an argument, I am one of those people. I hate arguing. I just like, you know what? It's just it's so daunting. It's exhausting. And I would just rather not do it. If we can't have a conversation where we have a difference of opinion or an exchange of ideas that might not be what you think, and we still respect one another from that, but it gets to be this volatile yelling match and, the leaving the room, the slamming of the doors, the driving off, those aren't productive. Exactly. And whenever that's the main element, I just said, you know what, to avoid that, okay, let's just keep peace. And so I would give in. And that's where I allowed him to have the power by me giving in.
Okay, so let's go back to you're sitting there, you're having this moment, you're listening to this podcast. It's all serendipitous, right? Divine timing. You heard it at a point. You listened when you could hear it. So obviously there were things coming up now, right? The texting, things were starting to really bother you in this marriage. So what happened? You're listening to the podcast, your eyes are opening, you're hearing new information to give context around some of these feelings that sounds like you were starting to have within this marriage. What happened next? So you're listening, you've got a language. Were you trying to deny it, talk yourself out of it? What was happening for you as you were, getting this download of information that was really starting to resonate with what was happening within your own life?
I wasn't denying it. It was more so of accepting it and going, wow, this is my life. Right? This is my now present life. And the question came up to me, what are you going to do about it? And what are you going to do about it? Because I could go the next 20 plus years dealing with this, or I could say, okay, how do we fix this? What's going to happen? And so I came up with the concept of, hey, let's go to counseling. let's figure this thing out, because this is not right. And I don't want to live like this. But again, one of those tendencies of narcissism is that no, because then people would find out, right? People would find out his secrets. People would find out things about him. And so he just, no, that's not something that he wanted to do. So I said, okay, well, let's go to the church ministry. Let's go to couples ministry. Let's again, I'm trying to come up with solutions. Let's do this. Right. So we attend one of the ministry sessions at the church. We get our pamphlets, we come back, we spend 1 week having these discussions. And again, right, situations that are volatile can only not be for a certain amount of time before they go back to the way that they were. And so that's what was happening. And it started to be, well, we're not communicating. That's our issue, is that we have a problem communicating. And then it just got worse. Every time I would say something, it would blow up into an argument. And I mean, it's the slightest little things. Turning on the water to the irrigation system posed an argument, right? Just that, things like that were just so nonsensical. This didn't make sense, would blow up into a massive argument until, Susan, I was just drained.
What about his family and friends? Like, what, I mean, were there any signs there? And I'm, obviously I'm going down this path because I want other people who could be in these potentially toxic relationships to kind of zone in on, are there other signs that they're missing? Did he have, because one of the other hallmarks with narcissistic personality disorder, they can't form, healthy relationships. And so what was going on in his world with his family and his friends?
He did not communicate with his family, and he didn't want me to communicate with his family. So his sister and his brother, they had off and on relationships. They also lived out of state. So there wasn't like, you could drive around the corner to their house or even down the block or whatever to their home. They lived out of state.
So did he make up excuses as to why he did not have relationships or communication with his family?
Oh, yeah. There was always excuses. What was one with him and his brother. His brother didn't like him because he went to college, and he was the one that mom liked, and so his brother was the troublesome brother, and so they didn't get along. The sister, she always had issues, and so he would always try to say, this is what she needs to do, and his life was better, and he was better equipped to tell other people how to live their lives. And so there was just that. Right? There's that sense of superiority. And that too is another trait. There's that sense of superiority. And every time they would have a conversation with his mom, and I would say, oh, let me talk to her. No, she's got to go now. It's like, why can't I ever have a part of this conversation? And even to the point of, don't call them. You don't have to call them. They're just, don't even get in touch. Don't even get in touch with them, for some reason or another. And so I was like, okay, this is just a weird dynamics. Because for me, on the other side, my family and I, they came to visit. They would come in from out of town. They would visit. They would call me up on the phone. And it was always, why is your family always here? How long are they staying? And there was just always an issue about people that were around me. And so he did everything in his power to move everyone away so that he was all I had.
Exactly. And so this story then, when you started to, it sounds like, get increasingly uncomfortable in this marriage, it's exhausting. I mean, let's face it, whether you acquiesce or fight, both are exhausting. It's an expenditure of energy, right? You're either like sucking it in or you're explosive or whatever it is, it's all exhausting. And so you said that in this marriage that you felt isolated, you felt he gaslighted you all the time. There was verbal abuse, and you got to a point where you asked for a divorce. Lead us to that moment, because that takes a tremendous amount of courage. And I don't know if you had fear, like, was he going to explode? How was he going to react? So bring us down that path of, you start to have this awakening, you hear the podcast. when do you decide enough is enough and you're gonna, because I know that I know that things spiraled after you asked for that divorce. So
Mhm.
what was the breaking point where you're like, I cannot do this anymore?
When we, again, I was asking, what? I don't understand why everything is like this mountain. I don't understand why everything is this mountain. Why can't I just have a conversation with you? And either we go to counseling or we have to separate. It's got to be one or the other. Either we go to counseling or we have to separate. Now, here's what's interesting was at the time we were renting. We were renting a home. And again, this is what's so interesting. This was in our second year of renting the home because we were in the process of buying a home and just hadn't gotten there yet. So year one, rent for a year. Year two, for some reason, I said, let's just do 6 months. Let's rent for 6 months because by then we should find someplace where we, would like to go. And it's so interesting because as the lease was ending that January, this fallout of, let's, when the lease ends, let's separate, let's just take some time away. And this was December. So this was December of 2018. The lease was ending January of 2019. Said, okay, let's just take some time and separate. So I had went out, found an apartment, had put a deposit on the apartment because this was it. I'm like, there's nothing else I can do for this. He, on the other hand, realized that his situation wouldn't allow him to be able to do an apartment and a car note and all of these things because I bear the brunt of the financials. So that there was an infuriating aspect for him also. So I decided, okay, I'm just done. At the end of the lease, I'm going someplace. And when he realized that I was serious, then it really got bad. And my mom happened to be staying with me at the house at the time. She was there for Christmas vacation. His daughter had moved in, and that was fine with him. But when my daughter had moved in, that was a huge issue. So here it is, December. And, I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get this divorce. We're going to separate. I didn't mention divorce. I said, we're going to separate. And then I got the apartment, was already set to move into in January. And he decided at this point, you know what? I'm going to make your life as miserable as possible. And so we get into this argument that was really blown up. I mean, this was probably one of the worst arguments we had had. And so my daughter had called the police. I was on the phone with her. She heard him in the background yelling and screaming. So she calls the police. The police come. I go to the door. I'm outside and I'm talking to the police officer. And here's what's interesting is at the time, I was a volunteer. I was a volunteer for the police department through their Citizens Patrol program. So I didn't know this particular officer, but I had been to the police department early on and said, look, I'm in this situation. What can I do? And they literally told me there's nothing we can do because nothing has happened. There's been nothing physical. So there's really nothing I could do. You can't lock him out. You can't ask him to leave. He's on the lease. All of those things, right? That goes into the legalities of it. So I'm outside talking to the police. Apparently he looks outside. He sees the police car outside and he doesn't call the police. So now another patrol car pulls up, goes into the home, speaks to him. He tells that police officer that I pushed him. So that never happened. We never had any physical altercations. It was only verbal. That police officer then comes outside as I'm talking to this police officer that I'm speaking to, and I'm sharing with him, we're moving out in a few weeks. We just thought we could stay here until the lease ended and we were going to part ways. The other police officer comes out and he says, have you ever hit him? And I said, no, it's only been verbal. He says, he said you pushed him, turn around, you're arrested for domestic violence. What? What are you talking about? So I get arrested.
Wait a second. Wait. Okay.
It's
unbelievable. So he says that you pushed him and they arrest you on domestic violence?
Yes. And get this. He told them I pushed him the day before. So not even in that moment, but the day before. And I go, that never happened. So yes, I get spun around. handcuffs put on me. Now, here's what's so interesting is that the police officer that I was speaking to, he says, I'll take her. So he takes me in the car. And I'm bawling because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't believe this is happening. I said, I told you that nothing happened. And I could tell this officer was having this mental dilemma because he knew what was happening wasn't right. So much so that we get to the corner, he stops the car and we sit there for about 5 or 10 minutes and we're having a conversation. And I know that he knows this is wrong because he's hesitant on even taking me to the station. So then we get to the station and he's like, you know what? Is there anybody you want to call? Yes, I want to call my pastor. I call my daughter. I call my, so she can come to the house and get my mom. So I go to jail. I'm there for 3 days, which was another ordeal within itself.
It sounds insane to me. This sounds insane to me. There's no marks on him. There's nothing to even prove that you even, it's crazy, actually.
Yeah. It's amazing how this transpired because from here, he goes full out victim. He's full out victim. He says, he presses charges. I get an ankle bracelet. I get removed from the home. I'm now literally homeless. I got 2 dogs and my mother, and I am literally homeless. A girlfriend of mine took in me, my 2 dogs, and my mom.
But wait, I thought you got a new apartment that you were going to move into.
Yes, but the apartment wasn't available until January.
This is December. Oh my.
Yeah, this is December.
It sounds like a movie.
It's going to be a lifetime. Wait till the book comes out. So I move in with my girlfriend. And so we're there and he's again, now I've got a lawyer because in my mind, I'm thinking, this is crazy. I don't need a lawyer. This is not going to happen. But as I start seeing that this thing is real, he's really taking this to the full extent. I'm like, I got to get a lawyer from somewhere. I've never had to have a lawyer before. I don't even know where to look for a lawyer. I go online and I'm like, okay, domestic violence lawyers. I find one. Happen to find a great one. He intercedes. He's having conversations. Now the DA is involved. This has gone to the state. They literally want to take this to the fullest. And I'm thinking it's because now it's a female, right? Most men are charged with domestic violence. You don't really get
Yes, but thank you for saying that because I want to just say a couple of things here. Mm-hmm. It's been a long road. It's been a long road for women, right? And I say women, I know that men also, obviously that they can be victims of domestic violence, but the majority are women still. And It's been such a long road to hoe just for women, for it to be taken seriously, etc. But here we are. This is his word against yours, and it's from a shove, and there are no marks. And there's no way to prove that there was any physical violence whatsoever. There wasn't. I get that. But this really is his word against yours. I'm having a hard time understanding this. What was your lawyer saying?
Again, the most interesting part is that I'm a member of the Citizens Patrol. So I'm trying to call people that I worked with, that I volunteered with. And of course, in situations like this, it's like, where's my phone numbers at? Right? It's like, oh my gosh, I never really thought that I would need access to all of this. And it was late at night and I'm calling people that are on the patrol unit that were a part of the program. And of course, I'm getting voicemail messages because it's like 9-10 o'clock at night. I'm getting voicemail messages and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then of course, what happens? Well, my phone dies. Now I got no numbers. I have one number that I memorized, which is my girlfriend's number. I didn't even have my daughter's number memorized, right? Because she was *1. Okay, you hit 1 on your phone and she would pick up. But my girlfriend had this number for like eons. And so that number was just embedded in my head. And that's the only phone number that I actually had access to. So I go in and interestingly enough, as they're processing me as a police officer because I was a volunteer. So therefore, that eliminates me having to go into the pod with general population. I go into what is called maximum security, where I have my own cell. I don't know anything about this stuff.
This story is insane.
You can't make this stuff
No,
up.
listen, Sheryl, seriously, what was going on inside of your own body? How were you holding it together? Or were you just in shock and you were sort of just moving through the shock waves?
I was emotionless because I could not believe where I was. I could not believe what was happening to me. And again, you read my bio, right? And this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, this doesn't happen to me. This is not something that happens to a person like me. I'm the one that goes to church. I volunteer. I'm a VP in a business. This doesn't happen to me. And yet here I am in this processing center at the county jail being told to take off all of my clothes, that whole process, right? Take off your clothes, bend over, cough, this stuff that is so humiliating and dehumanizing
and traumatizing. This is, and it's deep trauma. Yeah.
Yeah. And so as I go into this cell with this duffel bag that they give you with a pillow, toilet paper, a comb, and mind you, my hair, the comb that they give you is not for people like me with my hair. And I found, I share this story now, Susan, and there are areas where I just laugh through it because at the time I was in just disbelief. I was in disbelief. I didn't even realize I was in maximum security until I read the cover on the comb that they had given me, and it said maximum security. I was like, what? I was in such disbelief. So I stayed there overnight. The next morning, I go into arraignment. Now, mind you, it's December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas. I go to the arraignment. They give me my bond. They say my bond is $500. And I'm thinking, because again, I don't know. I'm like, look, I got $500 in my bank account. Can I just bond myself out? They're like, no, that's not how it works. And I'm like, okay, so what happens? Well, somebody has to come and get you, which means that they have to let you use the phone. That was another ordeal. It took 3 days that I was in there literally begging for somebody to help me.
And now it's Christmas Day, right? Because this was on the 22nd and now it's Christmas.
This is actually, I'm sorry. So this was Christmas Eve. I got out Christmas Eve. So This is on the 21st. So I got out Christmas Eve.
Okay.
And the only thing I can think of is, oh my gosh, what happens if I don't get out over Christmas and the staff is now a skeleton crew? They're not going to have, the courts aren't going to be open. I'm going to be in here over Christmas. That's the only thing that's in my head is I'm still, when I think back to it, I'm still in dismay because I'm like, I can't even believe that it happened in the fashion that it did. And then the treatment that I received in there was unbelievably crazy. Even, just the food, the communication with the guards, their lack for humankind. At the end, I will say this, as I'm sitting in there and I'm praying and I'm having all kinds of conversations and I'm praying for somebody to come and help me. The guards that I had spoken to, literally, they were laughing. They were saying, yeah, we'll get to you in a minute. And I'm thinking, what's happening here? I got so deep in prayer. The next day, this guard shows up and I share with him what happened. He says, I'll come back and I'll bring you the phone. By then, my hope had just diminished. I'm like, he's not going to do it because they've all said this and nobody's followed through. He came back. I'll never forget his name. I won't say his name here, but I will never forget his name, nor will I forget his face. Because when he brought me the phone back, I said, I prayed for you. I prayed for you to come here. He said, I will be back when it's time for you to go, and I will come and get you. And he came back, got me, didn't realize I was being taken to another place to have an ankle bracelet put on. He takes me there. He stays with me there. He stays with me as
Oh
I
my
get
God, I'm going to cry.
processed out, and then I leave. And I'll tell you, I am so eager to get out of here. My friend, who's the only phone number that I had that I called, as she's coming, I'm like, I'm not waiting in front of the building. I'm walking down the street. She picked me up on the interstate somewhere. I was like, I'm getting out of here. She picks me up down the road and then takes me back to her house. And that's where I stay until it's time for me to get my apartment. And that's where, everything else started to unfold with the state attorney and my lawyer, and the fact that everything that those officers did was incorrect, because my mom was there and they never took a statement from her. She lived with us during that time, not lived with us. She was there on vacation. So she was in the house, but they never asked her, did I
the
push
whole
him,
thing,
shove him, or hit him?
honestly, I volunteered in prisons for years for both men, women, and in the juvenile justice system. And you telling this story sounds so insane to me. And it was so unnecessary. And then I'm just going to use the word accept, because you are such a spiritual, prayerful human being, that I know there was that you, and I don't know if it was after prison, you had your ankle monitor on. I want you to share that story when you were with your mom, but also that moment when you were in the depths of despair and you read something that changed everything. So we're not there yet though, right? Like now you're out of jail. So keep on.
I'm out of jail. I'm now living with my girlfriend, me and my mom and my 2 dogs. And she's got a dog and she's got a condo. So, we're just like making do. We are making do. And I have on this ankle bracelet, which was something totally foreign to me. In addition to that, it was embarrassing. It's humiliating. And what I didn't know is you got to pay to have this thing on. I'm like, I have to pay for this.
Why did you have it on? You weren't allowed to leave the state. You weren't supposed to be near your spouse. What was the point of the ankle bracelet?
Because he did a full victims packet where he felt like his life was in danger. And so I could not go back. I had to be 500 feet away from the home, was not able to go back to the home that I picked out, was not able to go anywhere near him. But here's the reality, and this is how the laws need to be changed, because while I'm at my girlfriend's house, he comes there. And he's there, and I take a picture of him and I'm videoing him saying, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. And he's saying, if you just come back, I'll eliminate the charges. I won't press charges. And I'm like, no, there's no way I am ever going back to that situation. Here's what's interesting, and this is where I say the law is really, it's got to change. I tell my lawyer, I say, he came here. He said, did you speak to him? I said, he came in the house. He said, he can come to you, but you can't go anywhere near him.
So what are you supposed to do? Run out the front door and drive away? Is that what you were supposed to do? Leave the premise?
That's what I said. I was like, what was I supposed to do? He came to me. He said, it doesn't matter. The way the law is, you can't be within 500 feet of him. And I was like, this is ridiculous. So, okay. So
God, it's just insanity.
So that happens. Meanwhile, I am back and forth with my lawyer, and he's like, Sheryl, he's all out. He's going to press charges. He's like, he's not eliminating the charges. He even goes to my pastor. Now, he doesn't even go to my church, but he goes to my pastor to get my pastor to have a sit down between the two of us. And so I communicate with my pastor and I go see him because, I just want him to know what's going on with me. And he says, he came to visit me and he wants you guys to sit down. I said, he knows that I can't be within 500 feet of him. I said, this is him trying to get me rearrested, because if I come to this sit down, he can say that I violated the conditions. And so I'm like, you don't understand who you're dealing with here. He is manipulative, right? I said, this is a part of that narcissistic personality. This is the gaslighting. I said, they're very manipulative. And so didn't make that happen. Absolutely not. So talking to my lawyer again, and finally we decide, you know what? They never spoke to your mother. My mom writes a letter stating that the incident never occurred. But before that process happened, here's where you were going with what really snapped me out of this vortex of insanity. I had reclused myself to the bedroom. I was so exhausted. I was mentally drained.
But you're still at your friend's condo at this
Yes,
point.
I'm still at the condo. I'm mentally drained. I'm physically drained. I'm laying in the bed, and it dawned on me as I'm trying to sleep that this ankle bracelet it's not comfortable at all. Right? There's nothing you can do with it. You can't adjust it, you can't shift it. So it's just that constant reminder that this is not the way this is supposed to be. I don't know what happened here. So I sit there, two things happen. One thing made me realize that this was real. And this was, I had purchased for my mom a Christmas gift, which was to take her to see Diana Ross. Diana Ross had just turned 75. My mom was a huge, huge fan. My mom at the time was 86. So this was her Christmas gift, was to take her to see Diana Ross. And my mom was in a wheelchair. And so we go to the center where Diana Ross is. Now I have on pants because I have on this ankle bracelet, and there's this little green light that blinks to let you know that it's operable. And we go into the center. And as we cross over the threshold, there's the monitoring system where you go over, gosh, I forgot what they call it, but it's the monitoring system where you pass through. And if you have anything that's metal, anything wrong,
exactly. Like at the airport, in prisons, the metal detector,
right,
correct.
Metal detector, that's what it is. So we go through the metal detector and it starts to beep. So the security guard there, he comes over and I whisper to him that I have on a metal detector. And it was in that moment, he says, I need to see it. When he said that, and I had to lift up my pants leg, that was the most humiliating time in my entire life. I could not think of anything that has ever happened to me in the past that was more humiliating than me lifting up my pants leg, showing him that I was in jail. I had this ankle bracelet on, and I thought about the people that are looking around, right? I don't know if they were looking at me or not, but in my mind, everybody was looking at me and wondering, what did she do wrong? Right? Not thinking that, gosh, wonder what happened to her. No, but thinking, what did she do wrong that she has on this ankle bracelet? And are we in danger? Because that's the script, right? That's the script that goes through an individual's head. When you see something like this, is what did she do? And are we okay? Are we safe?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because those of us in the world of understanding trauma, our culture always says what's wrong with you instead of what has happened to you, which is exactly what you're talking about. The compassion. Where is our compassion? And we jump to a whole bunch of assumptions and conclusions instead of coming from a place of love and compassion for human beings. Anyways, continue.
Yeah, and that's exactly what was going on in my mind as I'm looking around to see who's looking at me. Right? It could have been self-paranoia, but that's the place that I was at that particular time. That was the most humiliating thing that happened. So we go there, and now we're back at my friend's home, and I'm back in the room, and I'm laying in bed. And as I tell this story and I say, I have some levity to it now, I say I was in my woe is me bed with my head on my what the hell covers, with my, on my what the hell pillow, covering up my, WTF covers, going,
it's so great.
Is it.
It's not funny, but you know what I mean? I'm just laughing because it's so absurd.
Yeah, this is it, right? So there I lay. And I got the shades pulled down in the room. I'm not eating, I'm not drinking. My poor dog is at the foot of the bed with me. He's like a ride or die dog. He's just laying there with me. And so I'm thumbing through a magazine, and I'm just, I'm not reading or anything. I'm just thumbing through a magazine, and I come across something that made me stop. And it literally lit the flame it relit the flame that had been extinguished in my heart, in my mind, and in my soul, because I was just empty. I was empty. And this quote, it was by Layla Delilah, and I have it right now on my desk. It is actually glued to my desk, written out. And it said, when she remembered who she was, the game changed. And I read it several times because it kept saying something to me. And it was such a powerful message. You know, it's that thing that says, if you ever needed a sign for a particular situation at this particular day, for this particular moment in your life, what's the thing that you need to get you to a particular place of self-worth again? And that's what it was. When she remembered who she was, the game changed.
And who did you remember who you were?
That I was this individual that never allowed my circumstances to define who I was. I always reached for the next level. It was always about the next level for me. I knew that my faith and the higher being, which I believe in God, that he had brought me through so many things and had just elevated me in every way in my career, in my life, the experiences that I've had the opportunity to do, the places that I've been able to travel. You know, I've been scuba diving, I've been skydiving, zip lining, all of these things was a part of who I was. And I said, wait a second, that girl, you can't kill that girl. That girl is invincible. That girl has purpose. That girl does not allow something like this to define the future. And I got up out the bed. Like I said, I threw back them WTF covers, got out of that woe is me bed, and I went to the mirror. And I looked in the mirror and I said, I dare you to rise and shine. And then I said, I double dare you to rise and shine. And the next thing I did was I filled out corporation papers and I changed the name of my business, which bared my married name, as a consulting firm. And I changed it to Rise and Shine. Now, I know Rise and Shine is so common, right? It's so common, you can't even get it trademarked.
No, I told you I wanted to rename my business that before you even came around. I'm like, what is going on? Because for me, it really is about we're here to rise and shine. We're here to rise in the essence of who we are and shine our light. So with the few minutes that we have left, tell us now, that was that pinnacle moment where you could have stayed in your woe is me bed with your WTF covers over your head, right? I mean, we know that people can succumb to their despair. We read about it, we hear about it all the time. You chose not to. You threw the covers off, you got out of bed, you looked at beautiful reflection in the mirror, remembering who you were. And where are you now?
Oh my gosh. I am in an amazement place. I am in a place of abundance. I believe in hope, as you see that's right behind me. That is my scripture, Psalm 71:14. But as for me, I will always have hope. That's where I live. That's where I rest. I've traveled internationally speaking. You know, you've read the bio, right? I've had an opportunity to be an author 5 times. I believe in people being able to surpass things that have happened to you once you realize that it happened to you and it's not who you are. And there's so much more ahead. There is so much more possibilities. There's so many more opportunities. And there's so much more that I haven't done yet. And I'm excited about that. I wake up every day with an expectation that today is amazing. Today is not only amazing, something amazing is going to happen today.
And do you feel like that experience accelerated your, what's the word I want to use? Your growth, your spiritual growth? Do you feel like that experience for me, I mean, it's such an incredible story of disbelief, but more than that, the resilience and the power. And, you know, we heard of the book, Good Things Happen, bad things happen to good people. And it's like, we all have a defining moment when we are at our wit's end, the end of our rope, whatever you want to call it. And even though sometimes it's not as conscious as it was for you. But we all have these defining moments that we either rise and shine, or we succumb to that other power, that darkness. And I know that when I am talking to you now, and when I was talking to you before we started recording, that I feel this incredible power from you, and you're inspiring. I feel it in my own body. And so I want to thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your story, but more than that, your resilience and your heart and your light, I guess, is what I really want to say, for shining your light. And because there's nothing like basking in the warmth of someone's light when they really are in their brilliance. And I don't mean to sound cliche, but that's how I feel. Like, that's how I felt after I talked to you prior to even this conversation. You are a powerful force, and I feel very honored to be able to interview you around your story. And I just thank you so very much for sharing so willingly.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for taking the opportunity to open up the doors for your listeners to be able to get a view into other people's lives, because sometimes we have this tendency to believe we are the only ones that's dealing with this thing that's happening to us. But when you realize that other people have succumbed to, much higher heights because of the thing that happened to them, then you realize you can too. You can too.
And we'll have all of your links, but Sheryl's website is risingandshine.com. And that is where you can read all about her. She's a world-renowned speaker. She is a business and individual coach. And as you can all attest to listening to her story, she is amazing. Sheryl, thank you so much for coming. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you.
And thank you, my listeners. And thank you, listeners. I love you guys. And we'll see you all here next week. And bye for now.
Bye.